My name is Stephanie Dennison, and I'm a Professor of Brazilian Studies at the University of Leeds. I recently went on a scoping visit to the Federal University of Minas Gerais. UFMG are partners of the University of Leeds through the World Universities Network. The main campus is in the state capital, Belo Horizonte, beside Pampulha, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is home to some of the most important early work of Oscar Niemeyer and Roberto Burle Marx, who would later be responsible for the design of the capital city, Brasilia. While Belo Horizonte and the state of Minas Gerais have long had strong traditions with Brazilian modernism that dates from the first half of the 20th century, my visit was spurred by a desire to find out what impact the so-called decolonial turn is having on research at UFMG and on culture in the city itself. I was staying not far from one of Belo Horizonte's main squares, the Praça da Liberdade, which is home to such a large number of museums and galleries that it has been labelled Circuito Cultural, or Cultural Circuit, and is considered the largest cultural complex in Brazil. Even though a big part of the cultural circuit is centred on showcasing elegant, mostly 19th century homes and buildings, space is being increasingly made for one-time marginalised voices of indigenous and Afro-Brazilian traditions. At the Centro Cultural Banco do Brasil, for example, I found a very small but still useful exhibition on the life and work of Lélia Gonçalves, whose intellectual legacy is undergoing a very timely re-evaluation in Brazilian cultural studies. I discussed the work of Lélia, who was born in Belo Horizonte, and other Afro-Brazilian thinkers with Eduardo de Assis Duarte and Adelso de Souza Cruz of the interinstitutional research group Afrodescendências na Literatura Brasileira. I learned about Literafro, which for 20 years has been the go-to portal for information on Afro-Brazilian literature, based in the Faculdade de Letras, or Modern Languages, at UFMG. In November 2024, the group will hold an international symposium, Negritude and Literature, to mark the 20th anniversary of Literafro, and to coincide with UFMG's annual Novembro Negro, or Black History Month. I was particularly struck with the links being forged with Afro-Portuguese writers and scholars, and those from the PALOPs, or African countries with Portuguese as official language, and the synergies with my own research on Afro-Brazilian audiovisual production. Two key names that arose in our discussions were theorist and academic Leda Martins, who taught for many years at UFMG, and her theories around spiral time. We also discussed Bantu Catholic poetics as postulated by the Minas-born Afro-Brazilian poet and writer Edmilson de Almeida Pereira. I was able to explore these synergies further with 5 researchers from Poéticas da Experiência, or Poetics of Experience Research Group, based in Communication Studies in the Faculty of Philosophy and Human Sciences. With their focus on documentary filmmaking, I learned about the many projects and regular publications they are involved with a noted focus on alternative documentary forms, including work produced by indigenous groups, quilombos, women's collectives, and so on, and often directed by members of the research group, such as this one. Researchers in communication studies contribute to the traditional knowledges modules offered by UFMG, the existence of which denotes a genuine effort to decolonise the curriculum. A number of the researchers and lecturers I met spoke of the impact that the Sistema de Cotas, or affirmative action policies, have had not just on the diversity of the student body, but the range of courses available and how they are taught. My sense was that while UFMG was perhaps a little slow to embrace affirmative action, it has certainly worked hard to make up for lost time. And while it isn't the only institution to run such a programme, its undergraduate degree in education aimed exclusively at Indigenous teacher trainees is renowned across Brazil and beyond. I met teachers and researchers from the programme who described their pluriepistemic teaching and research experiences since 2014 and how the next steps are to recruit more Indigenous researchers onto doctoral programmes and into permanent staff roles. We have much to learn from lecturers like Vanessa Tomás and Marina Tavares and their creative ways of opening up the curriculum, their addressing of issues around positionality and language bias, and their perception of how reparation can be translated to the educational context. But returning to Lélia Gonçalves, tucked away in a corner of a park in the centre of Belo Horizonte, I was pleasantly surprised to find a statue of Lélia, together with the writer Carolina de Jesus, who was also from Minas Gerais. The park was the main venue of the Virada Cultural, a weekend-long celebration of culture in the city at the end of August, where the city's diversity was clearly on show. At another corner of the park is the Arts Palace, which was hosting an itinerant mini-version of the São Paulo Bienal. The Bienal is a major cultural reference point in Brazil, And the 2023 edition was notable for the diversity of the curatorial team and the presence of works by Afro-Brazilian artists. Some of that work was on display in the Arts Palace in Belo Horizonte. For me, the most interesting museum on the Liberdade cultural circuit is UFMG's own Espaço do Conhecimento. Best known to city residents as a planetarium, the museum has worked in close collaboration with researchers from UFMG to produce a very thoughtful revisioning of the history of humanity, incorporating indigenous and Afro-Brazilian knowledges, including references, for example, to Machacali cosmology. I was given a tour by the head of education at the museum, Dr. Camila Maciel Mantovani, along with undergraduate students Cecília Ferreira, de Almeida e Silva. During my visit to UFMG, I was very fortunate to be able to spend the day at Inhotim in Brumadinho, in Greater Belo Horizonte. Inhotim is the world's largest open-air contemporary art museum. The museum includes permanent displays of key Brazilian artists, such as the tropicalist Hélio Oiticica, Dunga, whose work has its own huge gallery, and the photography of Cláudia Andujar, as well as international contemporary artists and sculptors. Space is also being increasingly afforded to Afro-descendant artists, and the big attraction for me was the boat, O Barco, a huge installation created by Afro-Portuguese artist Grada Quilomba, who had been one of the curators of the São Paulo Bienal in 2023. 134 blocks of burnt wood extend for 32 metres, in a reference to the unfamiliar interior of the navios negreiros, or the ships that transported enslaved Africans in their millions to Brazil. While Inhotim was breathtaking in its beauty and in its art collection, my experience was somewhat tempered by the knowledge that one of the main sponsors of the museum, and of Grada Quilomba's The Boat, is Vale, one of the world's largest mining companies, which began in Minas Gerais. Vale was linked to two major dam explosions in the state, Mariana in 2015 and Brumadinho, where Inhotim is located, in 2019, which resulted in hundreds of deaths, displacement of thousands, and severe environmental impact. These ecological disasters and their aftermath are the focus of much of the work of Gesta, a research group at UFMG that examines environmental issues. Gesta is coordinated by sociologist Raquel Oliveira, whose work with impacted communities ranges from advocacy to memory work. Raquel and her team combine the production of world-leading impactful research with an admirable activism, which frequently involves making personal sacrifices, dealing on a daily basis with the precarity of public education and the many challenges of working with very vulnerable communities. My final meeting was with researchers based in the Faculty of Education who formed the Grupo Movenças. The Movenças project brings together three strands of research and action, which in many ways sum up the work of all the researchers I met during my scoping visit. A decolonial vision of Brazilian culture, an investment in the creative process and in particular in co-production strategies, and a proactive engagement in documenting and archiving cultural traditions that are often overlooked. In the case of Movenças, the oral storytelling traditions in Minas Gerais.
A floresta quase secou.
Então, apareceu uma árvore cobertinha de frutas maduras.
Para a sorte deles, eles descobriram na mata.
Apareceu uma árvore carregada.
I'm signing off now with a huge vote of thanks to those who made this scoping visit possible. Obrigada a todos.